It sounds like the opposite of a smartphone. So many people, given time on their own, will just pull it out
Oh,
and start
yeah.
working on it.
And it's also the answer to people who'll say, "Oh, I can't do that," And I said, "Well, I wasn't born doing it either. You have to start somewhere. Just so pick up a sketchbook and a pencil. You got nothing to lose, and you might entertain yourself, and maybe it'll lead to painting, or maybe it'll lead to something totally different. But, cut yourself some slack and try it."
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Foundation in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
When you get to a certain age, retirement no longer feels like a purely theoretical concept. You start realizing those commercials for AARP and investment portfolio management are targeted at you and not your parents. And that someday there will come a time when maybe life will slow down a bit. And you wonder what it might be like, what you might do during that fourth quarter of your life. All right, that's not my way of announcing that I am retiring. But I've watched as lots of people around me have moved into retirement and found things that have given new meaning and new direction to their lives. And I'm not talking about golf. A few months ago, we met Jim Bory on this podcast, a guy whose life had the odd trajectory of going from selling plumbing supplies to becoming the self-proclaimed poet laureate of Dickinson Center in retirement. Our guest today tells another story of reinvention. Donna Stoner spends summers in the Adirondacks and winters in the retirement hotspot of Syracuse. And one of the things, probably the key thing in her post-retirement life, is art, both her own and the work of other artists. She is a watercolorist, a member of a painting group, and coordinates an annual Plein Air painting event at View Arts in Old Forge, which we'll hear about in a few minutes. So listen, and you might learn something about art, or maybe you'll learn something about life. Donna Stoner, it is a delight to talk with you.
Oh, thank you, Mitch. I really appreciate the time you're taking with me.
Before we get to the plein air event that's bringing us together for this conversation, I want to hear about your own journey to art and watercolor in particular. There is a point on your timeline where you were, the volunteer coordinator at a hospital in Syracuse, and then a point where you became an artist. How did you get from there to here?
Well, I was actually a volunteer director at two of the big hospitals in Syracuse. And the big part of my job was interviewing people, which I love doing. And I spent a lot of time talking to people because I figured the more you know about what somebody's interests and motives are, the more likely I am to make a good volunteer match, which means they're more likely to stay. And without quite realizing it, all those years I was kind of taking notes because many of the people that I interviewed were either about to retire or were retired. And I could tell the difference between people who were really happy being retired and satisfied with their choices and all versus people that just really didn't know what to do with themselves. So when I left Upstate Medical University at the end of 2009, I had a short list with me. And one of the items on the short list was that since I had kind of discarded all the arts kinds of things that I had done over the years, just because life got complicated, that I wanted to reconnect. And I wasn't sure how, but I planned to do that. At the time, my now husband and I were coming up to the Adirondacks, and I remember going to the National Watercolor exhibition, which is currently on at View, and people should come up to see it. We went, and I remember a couple of paintings where I thought, oh my gosh, to be able to express myself like that would be just unbelievable. I tucked that aside. I wasn't quite retired yet. And then when I did retire, I started painting children's furniture because that seemed practical. But the first thing I did was to contact View, the art center here in Old Forge, and say, whatever you're teaching next Monday, sign me up. And by the way, what is it? What do I need? because I thought, how lucky can you get? I can pay $40 or something like that and spend a day doing something. Somebody's going to teach me. Maybe I'll love it. Maybe I won't. It doesn't matter. It's just so beautiful that I can do that. So then I realized what I really wanted to do was watercolor, and I knew I was going to be in over my head. So I came back to View again and said, I want to learn how to watercolor. What can I do? Where do I start?
And I don't remember much about high school art class, but I do remember that watercolors were not easy.
Oh, watercolors. So after I started, a few people said, good God, why did you pick watercolor? It's the hardest. And I said, and why didn't you tell me that before I decided?
Why did you pick watercolor?
I was just walking into the View building half an hour ago, and I met a couple from Cooperstown. They were coming out of View. They had just seen the National Watercolor Exhibition. We got to talking. They were just overjoyed. But the thing we had in common was that this fella's father used to make the frames for a W.B. Romling, who was I think, just a rock star watercolorist. He's no longer with us. Anyhow, this fella made the frames for these paintings, and I said, oh, what a coincidence. My parents had two Romling paintings in their house, and every time I would visit, always looking over their shoulders where we happened to be sitting, were the two Romlings. I now own them and have for years, and I think that's in large part, I just have always been drawn to the look of watercolor. And I learned, it took me a while, but I've learned watercolor is a lot more forgiving than people let on. I think they were trying to scare me.
How do you describe what it is like to do that to friends or someone who doesn't paint?
What I would say is, whatever you ask other people about how to do it, don't particularly listen, because you got to find your own way. Don't buy a lot of materials, just start. And just some wise friend of mine, when I started, said, carry a little sketchbook in your pocket of your purse, whatever you've got, and just 10 minutes a day. It's at work, we're waiting for the dentist, whatever. Just start sketching, because what you're doing is you're training your eye to see. And no matter what you do, the better you see, the better you'll be able to interpret what you see into whatever form of art you choose. So yeah, my advice would be just start. Don't fuss about what you don't know. Of course you don't know. You're not born a brain surgeon either. You gotta just do it. But give yourself permission to enjoy just the process of learning.
Was it hard to do that as a grown-up? I have a son in high school and a daughter in college, and they're both sort of far along, but they're still young people. And
Sure.
I think of myself as a kid and doing creative things for the sake of being creative. And then I think about being an adult and always wanting to get it right, and that sort of self-censorship that we take on as adults.
Yep. Yeah, we're hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
We really are. Maybe that's why I love my Mountain Air Painter group so much, because there's every kind of person there from all over the central Adirondack area. And we're all very much adults. And so we give each other a hard time. We joke around a lot. We encourage each other. We goof off, it's just a really wonderful, nurturing kind of group. But yeah, I think, sure, we're hard on ourselves. But by the same token, don't you think most of us, as we retire and are aging, are being more selective about how we spend our time, and also enjoying not having to worry about time so much? So if I go in my shedio, which is my painting studio in a shed up here at camp, if I go in there, it's the most delicious feeling, Mitch, that I don't care what time it is. If somebody needs me, they know where to find me, but hours and hours will go by and I don't have to account for my time, and it's just paper and paint, and I just go for it.
Can I retire tomorrow? That sounds amazing.
It's wonderful. Yes, I'm lucky.
You were talking about that point at which you were about to retire and realizing that there were all these pieces of art from your life that you had cast off over the course of your adulthood. I mean, a few months ago, I had a conversation with a poet, a pretty accomplished poet, but he came to it in retirement. But even while he was working those several careers over his life, he had always at least written for himself. Were there artistic things that you pursued even as you were a volunteer director and had these other parts of your career?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's lots of different ways to define art, too. A lot of people say, ridiculous things like, I don't have any talent. I can't do anything. I just love to photograph, or I love to, knit. And I think that's an art form. That's a creative expression art form. I did practical things early in my life when my kids were young and I was new at housekeeping and all. I sewed a lot, because that made sense. At one point, I actually took an oil painting class at the YMCA in Syracuse, and I still don't remember why I did that, but I'm glad I did. And I painted in oils just for the duration of that class, and then I never picked it up again. Oil is complicated, I think, just because of the chemicals and stuff, and my children were young, so I just never did anything with that.
You mentioned the group of artists that you're a part of, the Mountain Air painters, and I gather you the group of you. Do you do a lot of plein air painting?
Every Thursday, um, really year round now, but from May through October, we meet every Thursday, someplace different. We're fortunate we've gotten enough of a reputation now. We're getting invited to some wonderful places that we wouldn't otherwise be able to see or have access to. But we also paint downtown, the train station, just a whole different bunch of places. So we do that every Thursday. And then in the late fall, a lot of us travel, like I go south to Syracuse, but a small group, and some of us come up from time to time. We meet here at View on Fridays. And then we switch from being the mountain air painters to the polar bear painters.
Well, and this is of course a great segue to plein air painting itself, and the plein air paint out coming up, the plein air paint out coming up. Before we get to the event itself, for people who might not be familiar with the term, I think a lot of us know it, but what is the significance of plein air painting and a group of you that like the idea that this is a pastime that is not a solo endeavor?
Right, because most people think when you paint, you need to be quiet and be in solitude. And, studio painting, yeah, or shadow painting, yes, of course.
Yeah, we think of the tortured artist,
Yes.
throwing paint at the canvas.
Yeah. But then think about, oh my gosh, the Hudson River School of Painters and many others in our history where people would, cart all these supplies because many of them were painting in oil, literally miles through the wilderness to capture and comment on, whatever they're seeing or feeling. And it's also like this year we've added 3 new members. One of them is brand new to painting, and the other 2 are at various stages, but just kind of jumping back in. And the camaraderie is terrific. I remember how I felt. I still do. These are my friends, and they'll give me feedback and, ideas and suggestions and mock me sometimes.
One of the most, I'm sorry.
Being together. And actually, right now at the Old Forge Library, there's a show of the Mountain Air Painters called Moose River Rocks, because we all paint together at this one particular spot along the Moose, and we love it there. So the library invited us to have an exhibit where it's all of our interpretations of the view from this one particular spot along the river.
I was just about to bring that up because when we first chatted about chatting, the thing that seemed most delicious to me about the experience is that you can have a group of people and they're all painting, the same subject matter, but they all come to it with their own interpretation.
Absolutely. Yep. Different medium, just different everything. Yep.
Well, and so to the point of why we're having this conversation now, this is, the 15th year of the Plein Air Paint Out? What's the idea behind this particular experience?
It's twofold. This is a fundraiser for View, certainly. But it's another way that View expresses its appreciation and encouragement to local, regional, national artists. In this case, we're pretty much regional. But it's a way to bring artists together who likely have not met each other before. You cannot believe the buzz in the room the first morning. It's unbelievable because, any group of people who love what they're doing, I'm sure it's similar, but there's just a whole lot of energy and sharing and encouragement going on.
What's in it for them? Why do artists want to be part of an experience like this, being a part of a group, as opposed to just deciding, hey, I'm going to come up to the Adirondacks for the first time and just paint?
I can think of a couple reasons. Some people are professional artists, and that keeps them fresh to have new areas and new groups and whatnot to come and paint. But they, in the long run, unlike myself, in the long run, they need to sell paintings. So this helps them expand their market and, all those other things that we understand. Some people come for the camaraderie, just the idea of, even though I'm just, a so-so artist, or I'm, obviously not a professional artist, not an experienced artist, it's still a way for me to be able to spend 3 days doing what I love with people that I appreciate. And then I have the satisfaction of knowing that I'm donating a painting to View and it's going to benefit the whole organization and all of us fellow artists.
Why is it important for View to do this, to sponsor a 3-day event that, presumably takes a lot of coordination and certainly generates excitement, but as opposed to having artists just donate a piece of theirs for an auction?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think that in order to ask artists to donate a painting, some people just would, but certainly the person from Brooklyn wouldn't. So there has to be a balance of, it benefits View in a number of ways, not just from the proceeds of the auction, but it broadens our base of artists. People get to, they bring other people in to see their art, those kinds of things. But you have to balance that with the reasons why an artist would take 4 days out of their lives and travel to Old Forge. For the fun of it, for all the things I've mentioned before, just feeling so grateful that we are able to do this. And View's a beautiful place. We are excellent, generous hosts. Some people are hosted by families here in the community. And we provide some meals and opportunities for artists to get together, and we have an artist dinner. So there's lots of reasons why they would.
Does this experience have an impact on your own art after, there's this sort of intense hive of plein air activity? How do you personally feel coming out of that 4-day period?
First of all, I drive myself completely crazy the month of August. I was just
no longer feels like retirement, huh?
Oh my gosh. I know my kids keep saying, Mom, you're retired. It's a good crazy. But so I sat my husband down in my studio last night and put out some of the paintings I'd done recently to decide which ones I would put up for my 2 consignment paintings. Mm-hmm. And I never like any of them at this point. I'm so critical. It's ridiculous. And then there's the biggie. When artists arrive, they have the option, and most do, have us stamp their paper or their canvas. So anything that is painted on the surface that is stamped is eligible to be entered into a competition. So between Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning and Friday at 3:00, if you want to submit those paintings, we're having a contest. Steve Fletcher is our guest juror, and there are wonderful prizes. So I could win money, I could win some free paint, I could just win the unbelievable honor of knowing that my painting was a judge's choice or for second or third prize. So there's that. And I don't paint well under pressure. Plus I'm chair of the committee. So I keep getting interrupted, but that's a lot of pressure, I got to admit. And then again, doing something good enough that I feel like I want to frame and donate to View that's another layer of pressure and that we all feel.
And then after it's over, does it feel like somebody has taken the cap off the valve and you decompress?
Yeah. And September and October, I love those 2 months. So then the event's over. Hopefully it's gone well. Everybody's happy. And then I can just paint for me.
Well, so let me bring things sort of full circle. When you are in your shedio or you're out someplace in the fresh air and you're working with your watercolors and your brushes and your canvas, what are you feeling?
Well, first of all, just being out in the fresh air, not with my friends on Thursday, but just me. Just being out in the fresh air for the express purpose of standing still and observing and feeling and hearing everything going on around me, and then taking the time, which takes a lot of time for me, to figure out what I want to paint and why do I want to paint it? What is it about that particular scene that I think I should comment about in my painting? And that just feels, I mean, it's frustrating to try and figure out what I'm going to paint. But mostly it just feels so wonderful to be able to do that. Yeah, that's how I feel. Then I start painting and I get completely carried away. I do a sketch. I might do a color study like you're supposed to, but I very often jump ahead just because I just get so excited when that paint hits the water and does its magic. And I often don't have any clue what it's going to do. And sometimes it's not so great, but more often than not, it's just a delightful surprise. And I think, well, that sap green, that just kind of bled all over the place. But look at all the beautiful stuff it did with these other adjacent colors. So I am always just happy to be painting.
It sounds like the Bob Ross theory that there are no mistakes, only happy accidents.
Absolutely. Yep.
Do you have a sketchbook with you at all times?
No.
After all that?
I know. Yeah. Well, I am not a rule follower. That's why I said I do have a sketchbook and I'm getting better. I'll do just a thumbnail kind of sketch or two. And then I do a value study with just pencil or pen. And then if I'm following the rules, then I do a color study to decide which pigments to use. But I stray off the beaten path quite often. I don't always follow my own sketch, but I think, you know what? I can. And even if I don't actually draw, I am always, whenever I'm looking out at something, I'm always thinking, is that a painting? Is that worth me thinking about a little bit? I can't help it anymore. And I think about colors.
It sounds like the opposite of a smartphone. I mean, it's just so many people, given time on their own, will just pull it out and start working on it.
Yep. And it's also the answer to people who'll say, "Oh, I can't do that," And I said, "Well, I wasn't born doing it either. You have to start somewhere. Just so if you're really interested, if it really matters, pick up a sketchbook and a pencil. You got nothing to lose and you might entertain yourself, and maybe it'll lead to painting or maybe it'll lead to something totally different. But, cut yourself some slack and try it.
Maybe you'll just be happier.
Maybe you'll be happier. And much better than listening to the news too much, unless you're listening to NPR.
I was just going to say, unless you're listening to this podcast.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, I hope we're all a little bit happier now. And Donna Stoner, it has been really a delight to get to know you.
Thank you, Mitch.
Donna Stoner is a watercolor artist and coordinates the Plein Air paint-out and auction for View Arts Center in Old Forge. The 15th annual paint-out is scheduled for August 21st through the 24th. Stop by ncpr.org/northwards and you'll find some of Donna Stoner's artwork and also a link to everything you need to know about the paint-out and auction. Ethan Shanty is probably not retiring anytime soon, but he is an artist and he is going to use his audio art, or at least his voice, to share the names of the people who make this show possible.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, edited, and produced by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, Bill Hanel is our digital director, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. Music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.